Morning, everybody. Yeah, I went ahead and stopped the quizzes because we'd hit 70. But I guess that some people have joined the class since last night. For those people who didn't get a chance, I'm just going to give the credit because you were in the first class anyway. So don't worry about that. Someone in the chat asked if you can make it in this experience, the class with mostly C++ experience and hardly C#. I think you can make it in this class without any C# prior experience. As long as you have experience with a related language, whether that be C or Python or Java or anything like that, I think you can do fine. It comes down to how comfortable you are picking up new languages and reading documentation, but that's something that only you can judge. Somebody asked, can you assign the reading of each class in the syllabus? There are not assigned readings for each class, so no, I can't. Which version of Unity should we download? It doesn't matter. Okay, give people a few more minutes. Those people who are a little bit behind. Aaron asks, will a certain chunk of this class difficulty come from learning how to use Unity? I don't think that there's a lot of actually learning how to use Unity in this class. I think that the difficulty in the class will come down to understanding deeply the topics so that you can do well in quizzes and implementing the assignments correctly. The first assignment, as I previously mentioned in the first class on Wednesday, first assignment's not going to be all that difficult, but the later assignments will get more challenging. None of them are impossible if you put in the work, but they can be tricky. We are going to use Unity, but and it will be Unity 3D because it's just the name of the application, but the course is going to be almost entirely in 2D just because it's easier to do the math. And I'm not interested in forcing y'all to use 3D. But we'll be going over a little bit of 3D stuff in Unity right now. All right, let's see if I can go 30 seconds without having to admit additional people into the lecture. If we can successfully hit that point, then I can go ahead and get started. No worries, you don't have to apologize. I understand. Everybody's still adapting to this weird new world we found ourselves in. It's another admit. Go a few more minutes. Alrighty. Not a few more minutes. Go a few more seconds. Let's see if we can get a good starting point. Okay, all right. Not seeing anybody trying to get in. I'm sure there will be a few more stragglers, but we can go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. Welcome to lecture 2 of Game AI. We're going to go with a live lecture again today, and I'm going to probably keep doing live lectures as it seemed to work pretty well last time, even though it was mostly improvised. As per the usual, I will be watching the chat. I will also be watching the Discord if you prefer to ask questions on the Discord. So it's entirely up to you. I will try to answer questions if I see them. If I don't see them, feel free to send them a second time. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead. Oh, I should be moving to this microphone. There we go. That was going to sound a little bit better. And let's go to the lecture slides. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be doing a little bit of an intro on Unity. This is not going to be a, you think the previous mic was better. That's interesting. It's a far less expensive mic, so that'd be a shame. We can go ahead and go with that one. If you like this one better, we can stick with this one. Right, so we'll be going with a small intro to Unity. Yeah. Oh no, we have debate in the chat. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What are we gonna do? All right, I'm gonna stick with this one. I'm gonna go ahead and just stick with this one. We're gonna stick with this one primarily because I'm gonna run Unity in this class, and so my fan is about to get very loud. And because of that, I'd like to use the one that's closer to my face rather than the one that is on my actual laptop that I'm streaming this from. Okay, it's not even that expensive. So let's jump back over to here. So today we're going to be doing an introduction to Unity. This is not going to be a complete introduction to Unity. For each of the assignments, you're going to have to do a little bit of digging on your own in terms of Unity's documentation, but we'll be talking about that when we get there. But this is really just to give you a sense of what is the application like that you're going to be doing every single one of the assignments in the course in. But before we do that, a little bit of review. So we hit 70 responses. There are 70 people in the class, so I went ahead and I closed the poll. I have now since recognized that many people are still joining and leaving the class. So if you are one of those people and you didn't get a chance to do the poll, don't worry. Everybody's going to get full credit for this very first poll for the very first assignment. And in fact, there won't be a poll today, primarily because this is mostly going to be a Unity tutorial day. So everybody's going to get participation points for today too. They'll have another actual in-class poll starting on Wednesday. But anyway, I wanted to review this because I thought it was interesting for a few reasons. One is that the majority of you, 77.1% of you decided that you wanted to learn from this course how to use AI in games, which is great because that's what the course is about. Second up to that, we had general AI knowledge, which is all right. You're going to get some of that from the course, so you won't be completely disappointed. After that, we had experience with Unity. You'll definitely be getting that, but maybe not as in-depth as you wanted. Again, this is not a Unity tutorial class. We're using Unity as a test bed, sort of, for doing the assignments in. We are not using Unity as like a tutorial or to give you a general sense of how to use Unity. After that, we had game development knowledge. Again, you're going to be a little bit disappointed if you came to this class specifically for that. You might get a little bit of it along the way, but this is not a class about teaching you how to make games. Then after that, we had applied AI knowledge. You'll certainly get that, but it will be applied primarily in terms of games. And then we have last but not least, we have understanding pathfinding, and this one that you got cut off, the poor thing, was PCG. So both of those will be topics we cover. So if you're here for that, you will be satisfied for at least part of the course. All right, so summary of the last class. I introduced 3 major divisions of game AI. Can anybody throw into the chat any of those 3 divisions? Well, I take some water. Academic is 1, Indie is 1, and AAA. We got them all. Nicely done, nicely done. ID is close to Indie, so that's still pretty good. So there are 3 of them. The first was AAA, game AI. This would be for the majority of the class and most of the assignments. Indie, where we're gonna have 1 assignment focused on sort of indie game AI techniques, and then academic game AI, where we're not gonna have any assignments, but we will end up discussing academic approaches to game AI in the class. They will show up on quizzes and things like that. Couple notes in terms of upcoming stuff before we dive into Unity. So there's gonna be no class next Monday, as it's Labor Day. And then next Wednesday, we're gonna have our first assignment released. That's part of why I'm doing an introduction to Unity right now. It's because on Wednesday, I will be continuing this, sort of, but in the context of introducing your first assignment. So on Wednesday, we will introduce our first topic, which is going to be basically how can you represent space in a game? And then from there, we will release the first assignment. And you'll have basically 11 days from next Wednesday to do it. The first assignment, as I've mentioned, I think 3 or 4 times now, not a big challenge. It's mostly to make sure that you have downloaded Unity, that you can get everything running, and that you can sort of follow basic instructions. That's basically it. It's like a tutorial assignment if we want to use like game terms. Again, we are going to cover the assignment in class. Okay, so in terms of actually getting Unity working, the first thing you're going to need to do is download Unity. If you just go to Unity's site by default, it's going to try to convince you to buy Unity. Don't do that. There is no reason to buy Unity for this class. I think that if you were able to get into the labs on campus, you could see the student edition, which is a little bit better than the free version, but the free version has everything that we need for this class, so it's all we're using. Don't buy Unity. Once you've done that, you need to install Unity. You need to launch Unity, and then open existing project when you have an assigned project to download. So I am going to go ahead and launch Unity on my end, and then I'm going to have to change up my setup on OBS. So give me just 1 second here. Here we go. Oops, nope, that's not the one. This one. There we go. Now my face has disappeared into Unity. Wonderful. All right. So now you're going to see a lot of stuff that I just have separately here. The basic window looks something like this. So a few things to note. Up on the top there, up in the sort of right above my head, you're going to see projects. Now by default, when you download Unity, this is going to be empty because you're not going to have any projects. Unity might also get mad at you because it wants you to sign in, as you can see up in like the top right, I guess. Otherwise, you're going to see a list of projects. Now, when you actually have assignments, an assignment to use, you will be able to directly open it from here by clicking the Open button, which is also all the way on the top right of the screen. But for now, let's pretend that I'd never opened Unity before. I would have nothing, and so I would have to go ahead and hit the, oh, this is fun. It closed the window as I did that. This is fine. I can go ahead and hit New. So I'm gonna make a new project. I have to give it a name, so I'm just gonna call it Test. Let me be specific. Game AI Fall 2020 Test. By default, you can set it up to be 3D or with a lot of other options or 2D. Again, all of the assignments we'll be doing, we're going to be in 2D, but I'm going to go ahead and mess around in 3D because it's the default for Unity, and it will give you a better sense of how I can introduce all the different pieces of what's going on in Unity. Thanks for the link, Eric. Wait, sorry if I missed this, but does student individual matter? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Zhao. If you want to put a follow-up, student or personal download. Oh, you should, so it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and use the student version if you have the student version, but you can go ahead and just use the free version as well. I think student is also free. You have to like sign up with a university ID or something like that. Are there any issues running Unity on Linux? None that I know of. That's weird that it would be a 404 not found if you go to that website. I can get to that website just fine. Well, Alan, if you can't, for some reason, just access the URL that's right here, then instead, you can just Google Unity download and you should be able to find it just fine. It might be a connection on your end issue, so I don't think I'm having any issues accessing that site. All right, I believe in you, Alan. Okay, so let's jump back over to Unity. And, oh, I'm gonna need to re-up. Let's get rid of these two. Boop. And this one. Boop. And let's go ahead and re-add Unity up here. Okay, I have to rescale this one a little bit. There, whoop, that's now a little small. It's baby Unity. Okay, so this is the default Unity view. This is what you're going to see if you don't see anything else. There's a few things going on in here. Let me actually, it's a little bit difficult to see on the Zoom. Let me squish this a little bit more. So we actually, there we go. Okay, everything's mostly on screen now. All right, so a few things to begin with. Unity is set up so that basically you have a number of different windows that are all just nested by default. And they're sort of giving you different views into a scene. A scene is like the default chunk of game that Unity represents. So anytime that you see the little Unity logo, see where it says sample scene, it has a little Unity logo next to it. I've now clicked it. Anytime you see that, that indicates the scene that you're in. I'm gonna go ahead and save the scene. I just Control S, it doesn't do anything. I can go ahead and do save project as well. There's no changes right now. If we go ahead and click down this bottom arrow, we can see we have a couple things by default set up in our scene. The first of these is a camera. So our camera, you can see right here. I'm gonna go ahead and make this window a little bit bigger so we can see it a little bit better. Here's our camera. It's got a little camera icon, and you can see, maybe the video quality isn't good enough, but you should be able to see the sort of lines coming off of the camera indicating our field of view. We also have what is referred to as a directional light, which unsurprisingly is a light with a direction. So it basically is going to cast in a specific direction. Here it is, right here. So the way that Unity works is you have individual game objects, for example, this main camera and this directional light. And these different game objects have a few things in common. So for example, if we look over here in the inspector view, we can see that all game objects have a name, like main camera or directional light. That's a name we can change if we really want to. So I can say instead, I want to call this the sunbeam. I don't know, why not? This doesn't do anything. It's still exactly the same as it was previously. I've just renamed it. Jump back over to Unity. The more interesting thing going on here, and it's sort of a fundamental thing that you're going to be messing around with, is the transform component. All game objects have a transform component. This says, where is that object in the 3D space? So we have a few things going on here, right? We have a position, this first value, these first three values, X, Y, and Z, or Z, apologize. We have rotation, and we have scale. So for example, on my main camera, if we look over here on the left, keep your eyes over here on the left. If I go ahead and change this X from 0 to say 10, you can watch as I hover back and forth, jump back and forth between these two positions. Pretty nice. So directly altering the positions of objects in this view, this sort of GUI view, is something that you are going to almost never be doing. Instead, you are going to be writing code to change, I can't see the screen sharing clearly. Well, it's going to be a little bit fuzzy, unfortunately. So you're not going to see things perfectly. I would recommend, if you really want to see like exactly what's going on, that you open up Unity on your own end and follow along with me that way. I can, let's see if I can up my frame rate over on this end, but it's not going to be perfect. Let's see here. All right, that might be a little better. Let's try this one. Let's try that one. And let's go ahead and update my properties. Yeah, okay. That's about as good as it's going to get, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. But if you'd like, I do recommend following along sort of on your own in terms of getting exactly what's going on if it's hard to get a sense of this. What would be better, student or personal? It really doesn't matter. I'm going to keep saying that every time it's asked. Okay, so as I was mentioning, instead of directly editing something, you are much more likely to be writing code to be changing things. So let's go ahead and get a sense of what to do that. But to do that, we're gonna need a second object besides the main camera to mess around with. So what I just did is I made a cube. A cube is a sort of default shape in Unity. It's one of the most simple things that you can make in this whole setup. You'll note that I have this cube over here in my hierarchy, which indicates it's in my scene, but I can't see it in this game view. That's because I can only see in this game view what my camera can see. And my camera and my cube are in exactly the same position. As such, I can't see the cube. Now, this is a pretty easy change. All we have to do is move our cube slightly. So now I'm going to move a cube in a slightly different way. So I previously was mucking around with the transform. Instead, I'm going to grab this top left tool over here, this move tool, and I'm going to grab this blue arrow and I'm going to move it slightly this way. And as you can see, down here at the bottom left, the cube has appeared. Ta-da! We have cube. Congratulations. This is a extremely basic Unity object. Now, if I wanted to, by default, this is just going to be a plain old cube. To make things maybe a little bit more interesting, what we could do is we could put some kind of texture on our cube to make this just a little bit more interesting. So let's see. Let me go ahead and grab something, maybe, for example, this Game AI icon. So I'm just going to click and drag this Game AI icon into, this is just the icon for the Discord, into the assets folder here. So you've just seen that that's popped in. And now I'm going to click and drag that onto my cube. And ta-da, we have a textured cube. We're doing it. We're doing games. Watch out. Textured cube, that's all you need. Now, from here, we are going to make a simple script to inform how we're going to move this cube. As I mentioned previously, you are basically not going to be interacting with the GUI portion of Unity much or at all. You're primarily going to be interacting with Unity through code. So let's give an example of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into my assets and I'm going to right click, and then I can get this menu over here, and from here I can hit create and then C# script. Alternatively, I could go up to my menu up at the top and I could go to assets and then create and then C# script. Regardless, either way, we're going to get a C# script. By default, its name is going to be new behavior script. We need to change its name. Let's change it to cube move. So this might seem just kind of random, me setting the name like this, and the name that I picked is somewhat random, but choosing a name is hugely important, because if your name of your script in Unity and the name of the script in the script itself don't match, you're going to get an error. So to give you a sense of that, I'm going to need to open up this script. Now this might take a second because we're going to be launching Visual Studio. And now comes the fun part where I need to rapidly swap between Unity and Visual Studio. Yep. Okay. And loading, loading, loading. You can't even see it loading. That's a shame. But now, ta-da, we have code. I'm going to keep this pretty massive. I'm going to keep this over here so you can still sort of see Unity there in the background. That's fun. So right now, you can see that it is named, our script is named CubeMove, just the same as we did up above, right? No, nothing weird going on there yet. Can I please show you once again how to make a new C# script? Sure, I can show you once again how to make a new C# script. Let's go ahead and go back to Unity. So let me go ahead and pop this one down below. Hello, it's Unity. What we're gonna do is we can click on our assets, then we can click right click, then create, then C# script. Instead, we could go up to our assets menu up at the top, and then go to create, and then C# script. Either one will work in terms of making a new C# script. I think the things or options that show up when you right click doesn't show up for us. Well, you might be on a different setup from me, but regardless, you should be able to click the assets menu up at the top of the screen. So let's see here. If I move, oh, I see. Discord doesn't record it. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. I can make one quick change to that, which is, this is going to get a little bit mucky, but I can do an entire display capture. Ho, 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 ho. Now watch as we look into the infinite. All right, let me cut this. Yes. Cut this. Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. So now, oh goodness gracious, look at this. We're recursive. We're recursive all the way down. There's so many of me. Oh my God. This is good. This is what everybody wants to see. All right, there we go. Hello. Okay. Oh, wow. Now you've got everything. Perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and just jump over to Unity. And I'm going to full screen this like this. All right. One more time for the folks at home. I'm going to right click. This gives me create C# script. Alternatively, up at the top here, I can assets, create C# script. All right. Everybody chill with that. I'm going to go ahead and go like this so that I can still get the text on screen. Now, notably, since I'm having to share it this way to make sure that you all can get an actual sense of what's going on here, if you put something that's just to me in the chat, it will show up here at the bottom. So be cautious, basically, with that. If you want, you can instead send things to the Discord, which is on a totally different screen for me. Okay, so as I mentioned a few times now, we're going to try to go ahead and make a change to this script, right? Right now, it was just called CubeMove. What if instead I want to say, I want this name of this class to be Make CubeMove. Well, if we do that, and then I jump back over into Unity, and I give it a second. Oh, it's not on anything yet. Let me throw it onto Cube. Oh, here we go. Uh-oh, a problem. We've got can't add script, callback executor. The script needs to derive from mono behavior. Oh, well, it does, but the problem is that it actually has a different name than we were expecting. I also like that there's a small space in between can, and t. That's good. So let's go back into Visual Studio, and let's go ahead and change this back to just CubeMove. So if we do that, I can now click and drag CubeMove onto Cube. Now, if we look here,
along with our transform and a cube mesh and a cube mesh render and a box collider, we now have cube move. All right. In addition, I should go ahead and say, you really don't need to worry about the mesh render or the box collider for this class at all. These first two are basically just being used for rendering. And this third one, the box collider, is used for if you're using Unity's built-in physics system, which we're not going to use because it's a little bit janky. Okay, so now that we've successfully gotten cube move the script onto this game object named cube, let's go ahead and write some code. So by default, you're going to see two different functions in any C# script that you first make in Unity. Now, you all in this course are not really going to be messing around with the C# scripts directly. You're not going to be making them. You're just going to be editing scripts that I give you. This is primarily because we're going to be using an auto grader for the course, so I need to make sure that everything's consistent. So you're just going to be changing functions or adding functions to existing scripts, not making them on your own, until we get a little bit later on. Then you'll be using it a little bit. Regardless, it's a good sense to get an idea of how these different functions work by default. So we have start. Now, who can guess, can give me just a sense of what on earth start might do? What start might be used for? Can I get some guesses in the chat? Oh, wow, look at that. Whee! Start is executed when the game is ran. Yeah, all right. Initialize this object, called when the object is created. So yeah, on most of you are right. You're a little bit off. So start is going to be called, it's just a function that is going to be called before the first frame update of the object that this script is on. Now that has a few meanings to it, right? So one is that this function can then be used to initialize the object, to initialize certain values in the object, or to grab certain things that we want this object to have. But that's not only what it's used for. And notably, if I spawn an object, so if I'm making an object entirely from scratch, right? If I just spawn an object in the world and it has a script on it, start is going to be run the very first frame that that object comes into being. And then after that, every frame after that, update is going to be called. So we can use these two facts to set up all kinds of different behaviors in our basic scripts. For now, we're going to be ignoring start because it doesn't matter. And we're just going to be messing around with update. So as I mentioned to you, we are mostly going to be using scripts to cause things to happen in your Unity assignments, in your games, basically. So what we can do is I can make a reference to transform. So transform is exactly just the transform object that we were messing around with in the Unity GUI. It is a way of directly referring to the position, the rotation, and the scale of an object that this script is on. So for example, I can write transform.position something, right? Right now, we have transform.position. We've called that. And the interesting thing about transform.position is we can go get this object and set this object. So let's say that I wanted our cube, this cube right here, to go to the right, okay? Any sense, any guesses as to how we would go ahead and write something to get our cube to go to the right? Wait a second, see if anything starts popping up in chat. Some sort of vector function. It's a good guess, Aaron. Add vector to right. Transform.position equals XYZ. So we're getting a few different options here. So let's go ahead and let's do these from beginning to end. So we have transform.position equals transform.position plus some vector offset. So let's try that to begin with. So we're going to go with, sorry, I have to admit somebody, which means you have to see the infinite again for a second. So we're going to go with transform. Oh my goodness. People, there's 20 minutes left of the class. Stop trying to join the class. Transform.position. equals transform.position plus some vector offset. So transform.position, if we just double click on it, we can see that it is a vector3 object. This might be a little bit small on your screen. I apologize. This is saying it's a vector3 object. So if it's a vector3 object, that means that we're going to need to add a vector3 object to it. So if I start typing, immediately vector3 is going to pop up. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then I personally know that I want us to go to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit right. Okay. So this is our very first suggestion. This is from Ian. Thank you, Ian. Let's go ahead and jump into our Unity and let's see what happens. So to get anything to run in Unity, we need to click this play button that's up here in the middle of the screen. Now I'm going to click this and I'm going to need you to pay attention to this game screen down here on the bottom left, okay? All right, look at that go. Noom's off very, very quickly. So it works. Our very first suggestion totally works. Now there's a problem here, which is that if we go ahead and go like this, we're going to constantly be moving to the right. I'm hitting F over and over again in the scene view. The scene view is a separate view from the camera view, but it lets me see whatever I want. And we're constantly going to go into the right forever. Look at our X value. If you can see that, just going up constantly over and over and over again. Just a constant value up and up and to the right. So maybe, sorry about that, maybe we are moving a little bit fast, right? So yeah, so Jamie has a great suggestion, which is we should probably multiply by time.delta time. So this is actually the very next thing I was going to introduce. So time.delta time is interesting. So quick notion of how games work in terms of frames. If you have a sense of, if you're watching a TV, right? Or in this case, a laptop screen or a computer screen, you're getting an update to that screen. Anytime I make any change to the screen, it's actually that we're rendering a new set of pixels, right? The individual images are being updated. The default FPS of Unity, there's no default FPS. It will go up to infinity, Alan. Vector right is a constant, yes. Every time that we make any change to any screen, we're updating an image that represents that screen. Now, different computers have this update at different rates, based on how many things are being run, right? So this is this notion of frames per second. So if you have a very nice, very powerful computer, you might be going 60 frames per second all the time, but slower computers might go at something more like 30 frames per second. So therefore, we use time.delta time to make up for this difference. I can also zoom this in, which I should have been doing earlier. Time.delta time is going to give us a measure of how long it was in between the last frame update. So yes, vector3 is equivalent to, vector3.write is equivalent to 100. You can see it right here. Time.delta time is going to give us the time in between the last frame update, which means that it's consistent. It doesn't matter how many frames per second you're going. Time.delta time will give you an appearance of the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're 2 frames per second. It doesn't matter if you're 60 frames per second. The thing in question will seem to move at the same rate. Now, this is also going to make us look a lot slower. So let's go ahead and hit play. And immediately we can see very slowly, the cube very slowly move off the screen. I'm going to go ahead and do that again. Notably, every time I hit off with play, every time I hit play, and then stop the playing, and then start it again, we're resetting to whatever was our default starting point for the scene. This is important because I can make changes to the scene. So for example, I could spawn in, say, another cube. Oh, right, I need to go from here, game object, 3D object cube. I could spawn in another cube while the scene is running, while play is hit, but if I stop hitting play, that cube's gonna disappear. So it's important, if you're making changes in your Unity project, that you don't do it while the play button is going, while you're actually running the scene. You have to wait to make changes to your Unity project until you are no longer playing anything. Very important thing here. So, okay, so we've got something, it's slowly moving to the right. But it is not moving to the right when I want it to. It's just moving to the right by default, right? So that's not great. That's not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the notion of input. So I use an if. This is just a simple if statement. You should already have seen that. If you're not familiar with if statements, I recommend looking that up. You're gonna have a hard time with this class. I'm gonna do input get key down key code right arrow. So what this is saying is if the input sensor for this Unity project notices that my right key is down, my right arrow key is down. Sure, I can explain time.delta time once more. So time.delta time is a constant which is dependent on your frame rate. It's the time in between your frame updates. So if you are 60 frames per second, it's 1 divided by 60. If you are 2 frames per second, then it's a half a second. But it gives us a way of ensuring that our movement looks consistent across different frame rates. Anyway, let's jump back to input. So input, get key down, key code right arrow is gonna check and see, is my right arrow key down? So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in curly brackets so that this code is only gonna run when my right arrow key is down. So I'm gonna go ahead and launch the game again. Jamie, you're getting ahead of me. Yeah, so as it is right now, I'm not sure if you can hear, but I'm having to spam the right arrow key really hard over and over again to get things to move. Jamie, there's this notion of I'm trying to introduce things by having it wrong at first and then I correct it. All right, so yeah, so the problem is get key down is only gonna check the very first time that my button is down. It's not gonna check continuously, is this button held? So to do that, we just need to change this to get key. Get key is just going to fire any time that the right arrow key is down. So now we can go over to Unity, hit our play button, and now I'm not hitting anything, and now I'm hitting the right arrow, now not hitting anything, now hitting the right arrow, not hitting anything, not hitting the right arrow, etc. So okay, we've got a cube that moves to the right when we want. Nice. Now there's a few interesting things going on here. A few interesting things that just this code is gonna let us do. For one, even though I named this cube move, there's actually is get key listen. So there's not a notion of events the same way there is in other game engines. It is essentially constantly listening. Even though this is named cube move and I've only put it on a cube so far, that's not actually a requirement. So for example, I could put cube move on our main camera. And now if I hit play and I hit the right arrow key, it's gonna look like nothing is happening. But if we look from this view, we can see that in fact, my camera and the cube are moving together at the exact same rate, which is why it looks like nothing is happening, because our perspective and the cube are moving together at the exact same rate. So maybe we don't want that, right? But what we could do, for example, is we could turn off the script on our cube move, which is going to deactivate it. It's not gonna run the script anymore. It will still hold on to it if we wanna activate it later, but for now, it's not activated. So now if I hit play and I hit the right arrow button, only my camera is gonna move to the right, which does have the appearance of making it look like my cube is moving to the left. But in fact, if we zoom way in, let me restart this, and we look at the scene view, we can see that in fact, it is my camera that is moving to the right, not the cube that is moving to the left. All right, one more thing going on here. I'm gonna turn off cube move on our camera, and I'm gonna turn it back on our cube. And there's one other fun thing we can do here, which is we are not limited to a single cube. I know. You might be like, oh my gosh, a game with more than one cube, is it possible? It is possible. So what I can do is I can just hit Command D, which is just gonna duplicate this object. Instead, I could go to Edit, and then I could go to Duplicate. It'll obviously be different on a different computer, and we could make all sorts of different shapes with all of our different cubes. I'm just gonna move this sort of all over the place, get us a nice spread of cubes. Now, the interesting thing is every single one of these cubes, cube alpha, cube original, cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, cube 4, all have, if we look over on the right, all have our cube move script. So this is interesting, right? Now, if I hit play and I hold my right arrow key, all of our cubes are going to move to the right at once because they all have that same script. They're all following those same instructions. All right? Any questions on any of that? Get a drink of water. Okay. Looks like people are all right. Let me check the Discord, see if there's any questions right there. No, looks like we're good. Okay, so what is the difference between get key and get key down? So we covered that just a second ago, but we can recover it. So if I do get key down, then get key down is, oh, not get code down. Get key and, no, sorry. I accidentally was changing the wrong thing. We want get key down right here. So get key down is only gonna fire the very first time I click the button in question. So, right, if I hold the right arrow key, we can barely see the cube moving at all. If I spam the right arrow key, we can see the cube beginning to move because the script in question is only firing the very first time I click down with the right arrow key. Is there a method for toggling the script? So beyond just clicking it, yes. Anything you can do in the GUI, you can also do with code. So I could write a second script which would activate or deactivate my cube move script based on some conditions or just at random. The idea here is really to give you just a sense of what the scripts are generally about. Again, you're not really going to be interacting with them in this way, but you do need to know sort of how scripts work. Is input only poll driven or is there an event-based alternative? So there are events in Unity. We're not going to touch them though. If you're interested, you can look on your own time. Any other questions? Well, while I wait for more questions, we can go ahead and make an extension of this so that we can also go to the left. It's an easy enough change. All right, so all that I've done is I've made a else if statement, thrown a left arrow, oh, I should change these back to get key, instead of right arrow. And instead of adding vector 3.right, I'm now subtracting it. This is equivalent to instead adding vector 3.left. So now if we go back into Unity, we can see that I can safely move to the right and move to the left. Very, very slow shimmy back and forth. Now that is quite slow. And that brings me to the last thing that I want to introduce to you today, which is we can add extra things into the Unity GUI, into the sort of drop-down menu underneath the script. And we do that by creating public variables. So I'm going to make a public floating point value, and I'm going to call this speed. And I'm going to set speed by default to 1. And I'm going to go ahead down here and multiply speed by each of our sort of pieces of movement code. Now, if I go ahead and save and I go back into Unity, you'll note that immediately, basically, we had a speed button or a speed down drop thing pop up right here. Now, what I can do is I can directly change this. So as a reminder, this is what 1 looks like. All right, pretty slow. I can directly change this in the GUI to set different values that the script should run on. So for example, 5 instead of 1. Now it's going to move 5 times faster. And we can see that that is in fact the case. Now we're a speedy little cube. But there's an additional interesting thing here as well, which is I could now, for example, throw cube move back on main camera. And the speed value of cube move the script on the main camera, oh, it was already on there. I need to add it again. The cube move script on the main camera is going to have a value of 1. Start only runs once, so it wouldn't do anything. So for example, let me take a look at this. Now that we have a cube move code on the main camera as well, we can see that on the scene view, we are moving a little bit. So it's hard to keep track when we are at 1. Let's go with 4 instead. And now we can see that we can sort of follow along with the cube as we move to the right and left. Now you'll note that this makes the cube look a lot slower, and it's because we are following along with it, just sort of one step behind, which means that it ends up looking a lot slower than it would previously. It is relative velocity, yeah. But in general, we're not going to muck around too much with physics types concerns. But you know, this is a lot of those are relevant basically. So there was a question about what's going to happen if we put basically this code into start instead. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just show you what would happen. And what would happen, we jump back to Unity, we make sure cube is not here. What would happen is nothing. I can't control anything. Because that function, this function right here, is only ever being checked once in a single frame. And so it's useless to me. It doesn't do anything, basically. So do you have to initialize the public variable? No, we can just initialize it up here. Are you asking, do we have to set its value initially at all? No, we don't. So I could just set it to public float speed. And if I do that, well, now let me make a second cube just to show what the default would look like now. So let's create another, let's make something new. Let's make a sphere. All right, there we go. There's our nice sphere. Let's throw cube move onto our sphere, even though it sounds like heresy to me. We can see that by default, our speed value is going to be 0. So if we don't initialize the public variable, it's going to be whatever the default of that type is. So for numbers, that's 0. For strings, it's an empty string. For Booleans, it's false. For more complex objects, it's null or none. So let's see here. So we could go ahead and, so if I set this to 1, right, we can now watch as my camera, or my cube and my sphere move at different rates. Okay, so that's the basics of Unity scripting and messing around with public variables. This is going to come up in the first assignment, which we're going to introduce on Wednesday. This is technically the end of the class, so you need to bounce, go right ahead. Yes, I will post the recorded lecture on eClass as I did with the first lecture, and I will post the few slides that we had at the beginning as well on eClass as well. And I will send out a message just as I did on Wednesday with the recorded lecture and the slides. So don't worry about that. That's going to happen every single time. As I was saying, this is technically the end of the class. If you need to bounce, feel free to go ahead and do so. I'm going to hang out until noonish. So if you have any extra questions, feel free to ask those. I'm going to go ahead and stop my Unity share though, so that I can, boop. Actually, we can just go back to here and I can, ta-da! If there's any extra questions, I'm happy to answer them now. I will also, along with everything else, I will upload the, Unity Hub is required for the course, Alan, because Unity's changed it so that you have to download Unity Hub and then a specific Unity version. But it's not required. Nothing otherwise, except for technically, it's not required for the course. I will also go ahead and I will upload the Unity project to eClass as well, though there's not a lot there. Any other questions? How to make the camera view bigger, because the Mind camera view is a very small window. So again, the camera view is so the camera view in a 3D mode is perspective, which means that things further away are going to take up less of the screen and things closer are going to take up more than the screen. But you can change that out. So let's see. I can go ahead and do this. Field of view. Well, you can change any of those regardless. So let's go ahead and go back to the OBS camera. Watch as I descend into the depths. So if we click on main camera, we can, you can sort of very, very dimly see a few things going on here. You can see the edges of the screen like this. So the camera object over here on the right is sort of everything you're going to need. So first of all, we could change our perspective, our projection from perspective to orthographic. This is going to change everything to instead looking the same regardless of how far away it is. This is usually mostly used for 2D games. For perspective, if we want to change field of view, there's this nice little scalar, this nice little radial dial, and we can just mess around with this as much as we like. Easy peasy. We can also change things like the clipping plane, and if we just want to make the viewing rectangle a different size, we can also do that. So I can also mess around with the viewing rectangle by saying, like, I want it to be half the size, for example. It'll only take up half the size of the screen. In general, you're not going to have to mess around with cameras, though, in this course. All right, I'm going to pop back over here. Watch out, it's the infinite. The lecture recordings are linked through eClass. The first one is already up online. Any other questions? All right. Oh. Okay. I guess I can show you eClass. I don't think there's anything weird that's going on, right? Right now. Let's see. Let me go ahead and just share an eClass window. Okay. No worries. I know there's a lot of freshmen in this class as well. Okay, so let me just jump back over here. When will this lecture be available? Sometime this evening. Depends on how long it takes to process and how free I am on time. But it's usually going to be the evening of the lecture day. Let's go ahead and go to OBS camera. Ta-da! So this is your default eClass view. I mean, yours probably looks significantly different than mine. I'm only teaching a single lecture or a single course this semester versus all of you who probably are taking lots of courses this semester. So if we go over to eClass, we can click on Compute 296A2 Game AI. And then if we scroll down just a little bit, you can see, voila, the lectures. You can click on Lecture Game AI. And you can see that the video link is right here. So if I go ahead and open that in a different menu, I can now see my lecture from last time. Look at that fool. Is that helpful? All right, cool. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and call it here. Again, I will let you all know via an email when everything is up on the eClass. And otherwise, I will talk to you all on Wednesday. I will see you then. Bye.